The Life of Steve Jobs, Think Different is more than a biography. It is an investigation into the mind and spirit of one of the most revolutionary figures of the modern era. Steve Jobs, the iconic co-founder of Apple Inc., reshaped the landscape of technology, creativity, and consumer culture. His journey, marked by both resounding triumphs and devastating failures, is a testament to the power of vision, persistence, and an unrelenting drive to think different. From humble beginnings adopted as an infant by Clara and Paul Jobs in the suburbs of California, Steve's life was defined by variance from the mainstream. This difference was not merely circumstantial, it became a deliberate choice, an ethos that permeated every aspect of his being. Whether it was his fascination with electronics as a child, his rebellious spirit in college, or his profound spiritual explorations in India, Jobs constantly strove to break away from conventions. The chapters of this book chart his relentless pursuit to challenge norms, to see the world not as it is, but as it could be. Jobs' partnership with Steve Wozniak set the stage for the birth of Apple, beginning in the now legendary garage. Together, they sparked a technological revolution that forever altered personal computing. But Jobs' leadership was not without its complexities. His perfectionism, charisma, and sometimes volatile temperament shaped not only Apple's products, but also the culture within and beyond Silicon Valley. As we explore the genesis of the Macintosh, the painful ouster from Apple, the rebirth via NeXT and Pixar, and ultimately his triumphant return, each stage uncovers more of Jobs' multifaceted character. Across 2 decades, Steve Jobs spearheaded the creation of devices the iMac, iPod, iPhone, and iPad that redefined how people communicate, create, and live. Through his singular vision, the Think Different campaign became a rallying cry for innovators worldwide, encapsulating the essence of breaking boundaries and pursuing greatness. Yet, beneath the legendary success lay a man waging private battles against illness, against time, and at times against his own contradictions. This book dives deeply into the life of Steve Jobs, not merely chronicling the events, but interpreting the motivations and philosophy that drove him. It draws together lessons of creativity, leadership, and legacy, offering insights to anyone daring enough to imagine, disrupt, and persist. Whether you are an entrepreneur, creator, technophile, or seeker of inspiration, this narrative invites you to look beyond the headlines, discovering the immortal impact of a man who dared and inspired us all to think differently. Chapter 1: Born to be Different, Adoption and Early Identity. Steve Jobs' life began with a separation, a moment of difference that, whether consciously or not, shaped his emotional landscape for years to come. Born on February 24, 1955, to college students Joanne Schiebel and Abdul Fattah Jandali, Steve was almost immediately put up for adoption. The act was not born out of indifference but of circumstance. His biological parents, due to societal and familial pressures, could not keep him. This decision ushered Jobs into the lives of Clara and Paul Jobs, a loving working-class couple from Mountain View, California, who would become his true family. Adoption is a formative experience, its impact subtle yet profound. For Jobs, it imprinted a sense of being chosen, but also of being different. He often spoke about the lingering feelings of abandonment and separation, but also of gratitude for the love and support he received from his adoptive parents, who fueled his curiosity and nurtured his spirit. Paul, a machinist and handyman, taught Steve the intricacies of mechanics, instilling in him an appreciation for craftsmanship and attention to detail. Clara, warm and supportive, provided emotional ballast, encouraging his intellectual and creative pursuits. These dual influences, technical precision from Paul and emotional reassurance from Clara, became foundational pillars of Jobs' identity. He grew to see himself as an outsider, a perception he did not shy away from, but rather embraced and amplified throughout his life. This outsider status became a driving force for his decisions, enabling him to challenge assumptions and seek unconventional paths. Jobs' early self-awareness was apparent in his social behavior. Teachers and peers often remarked on his precociousness. He was intensely curious, restless, and unafraid to probe boundaries. There was seldom a question he did not ask, nor an assumption he did not test. This bold questioning was sometimes misinterpreted as arrogance, but for Jobs, it was simply a hunger for understanding. The intricacies of his adoption also forged a strong sense of independence. Though deeply attached to his parents, Jobs cultivated an inner world. Rich with introspection and imagination, he learned that being different was not a liability, but a source of strength and originality. It was this conviction that would later serve him well in times of isolation, rejection, and adversity. Formative experiences in childhood, such as exploring his father's workshop, participating in family activities, and attending local schools, helped polish his unique lens on the world. Jobs' early years, characterized by a blend of nurture, technical exploration, and reflective solitude, set the stage for a life that would challenge norms at every turn. His journey was not merely a quest for success, but for authenticity, driven by the belief that the most meaningful creations arise from those willing to embrace their differences. Chapter 2: A Curious Mind, Childhood Electronics, and Pranks. From the earliest days of his youth, Steve Jobs exhibited an extraordinary curiosity, a trait that would become a hallmark of his brilliance. Settling into the technologically vibrant heart of Silicon Valley, Jobs' childhood was shaped by an environment teeming with innovation. At home, his father, Paul Jobs, instilled in Steve a practical understanding of electronics, teaching him how to disassemble and reassemble household appliances. These hands-on experiences helped cultivate a fascination with how things worked, a passion that would drive him for the rest of his life. Jobs' intellectual curiosity displayed itself in his interactions with peers and teachers. In school, he was often seen as a misfit, undaunted by authority and impatient with rote learning. Rather than accept facts at face value, he pushed boundaries, questioning orthodox methods and developing his own solutions to problems. His teachers recognized his intelligence but struggled to temper his rebellious nature, which frequently manifested as a challenge to the status quo. It was during these years that Jobs met Bill Fernandez, a fellow electronics enthusiast and neighbor. Their shared interests led them to experiment with complex circuits and gadgets, often scavenging for spare parts around the neighborhood. This partnership opened a new world for Jobs, one where creativity and innovation flourished independently of structured education. Steve's penchant for pranks at school was legendary, whether short-circuiting an alarm system or orchestrating playful tricks on classmates. These antics were more than mere mischief, they were expressions of his inventive mind, seeking outlets for creativity and control. Rather than shun technology, Jobs used it as a means of agency, shaping his environment in ways that amused and challenged both himself and those around him. The magnetism of electronics intensified when Jobs discovered the Hewlett-Packard Explorers Club, an organization that welcomed young engineers and tech enthusiasts to tinker, learn, and exchange ideas. Here, Jobs encountered the perspectives of professional scientists and inventors, realizing the vast potential embedded in the burgeoning world of computing. Notably, it was at this club that Jobs would eventually meet Steve Wozniak, a connection that would prove pivotal. Alongside his adventures in technology, Jobs' voracious appetite for books grew steadily. He devoured volumes on science, literature, philosophy, and art, building an eclectic intellectual foundation that transcended his time. It was not enough for Jobs to understand technology. He aspired to grasp the deeper principles underpinning creativity, design, and human innovation. Jobs' childhood was punctuated by contradictions. He was rebellious yet sensitive, fiercely independent yet hungry for connection with like-minded souls. The pranks, the electronics, and the relentless questioning all fed a mind that refused to settle for mediocrity, more than amusement or defiance. These acts served as rehearsal for the innovation, disruption, and audacity that would define his adult life. In these formative years, the world began to witness the emergence of a singular talent, restless, imaginative, and unconstrained by convention. Jobs' insatiable curiosity and delight in challenging norms planted the seeds for a future visionary, one who would forever alter the intersection of technology and the human experience. Chapter 3: The Rebel Student, College Calligraphy, and Dropping Out. The next chapter in Jobs' journey unfolded as he entered Reed College in Portland, Oregon, an institution renowned for its liberal arts curriculum and countercultural ethos. Jobs arrived at Reed armed with skepticism of formal education, yet lured by the promise of intellectual stimulation. True to form, Jobs quickly rebelled against traditional academic expectations, finding little resonance with structured courses or prescribed learning paths. Although officially enrolled, Jobs began to audit classes that piqued his interest, disregarding mandatory coursework. Among these were calligraphy courses taught by Professor Robert Palladino. Jobs was captivated by the artistry, precision, and historical depth embodied in calligraphy. This seemingly peculiar interest would prove crucial years later, influencing Apple's design sensibilities and the topography of the Macintosh computer. The lessons of font design, spacing, and visual harmony left a lasting mark on Jobs' appreciation for aesthetic elegance and user experience. Jobs' time at Reed was marked by periods of introspection and experimentation. He navigated the counterculture milieu, attending gatherings, engaging with alternative lifestyles, and experimenting with psychedelics. These experiences expanded his consciousness and introduced him to varied philosophies, including Buddhism and transcendental meditation, leading him to question the material pursuits that dominated American culture. Unable to justify the cost of tuition, and increasingly disillusioned with the constraints of formal education, Jobs made the radical decision to drop out after just 6 months. Yet, dropout status did not mark the end of his learning. Instead, Jobs continued to roam the campus, sleeping on friends' dorm room floors, collecting discarded Coca-Cola bottles to fund meals, and attending lectures that intrigued him. He cherished his autonomy, seeking knowledge on his own terms rather than through the rigid structure of the curriculum. Dropping out was emblematic of Jobs' lifelong pattern. He was never one to conform. For the sake of convenience, he prioritized experience, discovery, and self-determination over security and tradition. This willingness to diverge from accepted paths deepened his belief in the value of intuition and authenticity, tenets he would later apply to product design and leadership. During these months, Jobs began to examine deeper questions about purpose and impact. He sought not only intellectual stimulation, but also spiritual fulfillment. Jobs' exposure to countercultural ideals and spiritual teachings fostered a worldview that valued simplicity, direct experience, and originality. Reed College, despite his brief tenure, left an indelible impact, shaping his future approach to problem-solving, creativity, and the relentless pursuit of excellence. Chapter 4: The Spiritual Journey, India, Zen, and Simplicity. Steve Jobs' quest for meaning and clarity led him further afield to India, in an odyssey that would remold his worldview. Embarking on this journey in search of spiritual enlightenment and the guru Neem Karoli Baba, Jobs sought to transcend the boundaries of his intellect and explore matters of the soul. Although Neem Karoli Baba passed away before Jobs arrived, the pilgrimage was transformative nonetheless. The experience in India was jarring and illuminating. Jobs encountered the poverty, chaos, and beauty of a society radically different from his own. He applied himself to meditative practice, fasting, and reflection, seeking to untangle the complexity of existence and cultivate inner simplicity. The trip stripped him of attachment to material comfort and sharpened his appreciation for essentials of philosophy. He would later apply to product design and personal life. India acquainted Jobs with the teachings of Buddhism and the practice of Zen, introducing him to principles of mindfulness, self-discipline, and presence. These spiritual lessons instilled in him a preference for minimalism and clarity, virtues he carried into his business dealings and design choices. Jobs often credited his time in India with teaching him to ignore distractions and focus on what truly mattered, both aesthetically and philosophically. Returning to California, Jobs' spiritual explorations did not cease. He continued meditation, participated in retreats, and maintained close relationships with practitioners and teachers. Buddhism, for Jobs, was not merely a religion but a way of living, a guide to reducing clutter, seeking harmony, and connecting with the deeper currents of life. This spiritual awakening was not divorced from his professional ambitions. It informed the design philosophy of Apple and NeXT, privileging simplicity, coherence, and user-centric functionality. Devices were not merely tools, they were expressions of Jobs' pursuit of elegance and purity. In interactions with colleagues and partners, his Zen-influenced approach led him to strive for directness and clarity, eschewing the unnecessary in favor of the essential. Jobs' journey through India and Zen provided a foundation for his later leadership, a conviction that simplicity is the ultimate sophistication, and that true innovation arises from clear, focused intention. The spiritual dimension of his life became inseparable from his public persona, challenging the conventional narrative of business success, and offering a model for integrating creativity, mindfulness, and purpose. Chapter 5. The Meeting of Minds, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. The defining partnership of Steve Jobs' early career began in Silicon Valley, where his restless energy intersected with the brilliant technical mind of Steve Wozniak. Wozniak, a fellow creative and electronics genius, shared Jobs' passion for innovation but approached problems with a different temperament: humble, gentle, and deeply focused on engineering perfection. Bill Fernandez, Jobs' childhood friend and neighbor, introduced the two in 1971. The pair quickly bonded over their love of technology and mischief, collaborating on pranks and electronic projects. The first significant joint venture was the Blue Box, a device enabling users to hack the telephone system and make free long-distance calls. Jobs seized upon the commercial potential of Wozniak's invention, demonstrating early acumen for taking technical feats to market. Together, they sold dozens of units before abandoning the project due to legal risks. This partnership balanced Jobs' visionary instincts with Wozniak's technical mastery. Jobs was not a programmer or engineer by conventional standards. Instead, he excelled in sensing opportunity, motivating people, and challenging the boundaries of what could be achieved. Wozniak's skill in design and Jobs' entrepreneurial spirit nurtured a synergy that would soon give birth to Apple. Despite their shared interests, Jobs and Wozniak possessed sharply contrasting personalities. Wozniak prioritized fun and intrinsic satisfaction in creation, while Jobs was relentless, critical, and ambitious about scale and impact. They argued, debated, and pushed one another, a dynamic that sparked ideas neither could have realized individually. Their collaboration was the crucible for revolutionary innovation. Jobs' ability to recognize the broader implications of Wozniak's prototypes created the context for Apple's genesis, from building intricate gadgets in a garage to envisioning a future where personal computing was ubiquitous. Jobs and Wozniak embarked on a mission to democratize technology, making powerful tools accessible to ordinary people. This meeting of minds did more than set the stage for commercial success. It defined the culture and spirit of early Apple. The blend of technical genius and audacious vision became the recipe for breakthrough products and an enduring legacy, launching both Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak into the pantheon of tech icons. Chapter 6. The Garage Dream. The birth of Apple. In the spring of 1976, what began as a hobby in the Jobs family garage evolved into one of the defining moments in the history of technology: the creation of Apple Computer. Jobs and Wozniak, fueled by a belief that computers should be accessible to everyone, set out to disrupt the nascent personal computing industry. Their prototype, the Apple I, combined Wozniak's engineering prowess with Jobs' knack for design, branding, and marketing. The environment in which Apple was born was far from illustrious. The garage was cluttered, noisy, and barely suited to the demands of manufacturing circuit boards. Yet, it was the ideal incubator for creativity and ambition. Removed from the bureaucracy of established corporations, Jobs drew in friends and family to help with assembly, imbuing the early Apple team with a spirit of camaraderie and unorthodox collaboration. Jobs' vision was not limited to engineering but extended to user experience, packaging, and presentation. He insisted that the Apple I should be sold as a fully assembled product, packaged neatly, and supported by clear documentation. This commitment to quality and usability distinguished Apple from competitors and sowed the seeds for its future reputation. Securing initial funding was a test of Jobs' persuasive skills. He convinced Mike Markula, an astute investor and former Intel executive, to provide financial backing. Markula's investment and guidance enabled Apple to move from garage hobbyists to credible business contestants. The first product, the Apple I, sold over 100 units, primarily to hobbyists and local computer stores. However, it was the introduction of the Apple II featuring color graphics, an elegant case, and mass-market appeal that truly launched Apple into national prominence. Jobs' relentless pursuit of perfection drove the team to produce a device that was not just functional but beautiful and accessible. The Garage Dream encapsulated the spirit of Silicon Valley: innovation, resourcefulness, imagination, and audacity. Jobs' leadership style, demanding, inspiring, and sometimes polarizing, set the tone for the company's culture and ethos. Apple's origins demonstrate how determination, partnership, and vision can translate humble beginnings into world-changing achievements. Chapter 7: The Macintosh Vision, Changing the Computer Forever. Steve Jobs' reputation as a visionary was perhaps most conspicuously affirmed by the conception and launch of the Macintosh. By the early 1980s, Apple had experienced unprecedented growth, thanks to the success of the Apple II, but Jobs was restless. He envisioned a computer that was not only powerful, but also radically intuitive and visually appealing, one that could transform not just industries, but human life itself. The Macintosh project was Jobs' response to the limitations he perceived in existing computers. He assembled a dedicated team, famously called the Pirates, imbued with the freedom to innovate outside the constraints of Apple's corporate bureaucracy. Jobs pushed the team relentlessly, demanding excellence and creativity beyond conventional boundaries. The project's culture was intense, driven by urgency, camaraderie, and Jobs' singular focus on disrupting the technological status quo. At the heart of the Macintosh was a graphical user interface, inspired by Jobs' visit to Xerox PARC, where he observed the nascent development of point-and-click navigation and icon-based design. Jobs instantly grasped the revolutionary potential of making computers accessible through visual interaction rather than cryptic text commands. The Macintosh team pursued this vision with fervor, perfecting elements such as the mouse, drag-and-drop file management, and proportional fonts. Jobs' obsession with quality was evident in every detail, from the elegant design of the hardware to the emphasis on user experience. He insisted that the Macintosh should be insanely great, challenging his engineers and designers to overcome technical hurdles and innovate relentlessly. This perfectionism exacted a cost in stress and conflict, but it succeeded in elevating the standard for personal computing. The Macintosh's launch in 1984, heralded by the now iconic 1984 Super Bowl commercial, marked a watershed moment. The product itself was beautiful, friendly, and unlike anything the public had seen before. While initial sales were modest, the Macintosh gradually became the platform of choice for creatives, educators, and technophiles, cementing Apple's reputation as a leader in innovation. Jobs' vision for the Macintosh transcended mere technology. He saw it as an educational and creative tool, a means for people to think different, reflect, and invent. The legacy of the Macintosh is not just in its technical features, but in its enduring impact on design, user-centered innovation, and the idea that technology should empower, not intimidate. Chapter 8: Genius and Fire, Leadership, Perfectionism, and Conflict. With the success of the Macintosh, Steve Jobs was propelled into the upper echelons of business stardom. Yet, his leadership style, characterized by uncompromising perfectionism, intensity, and often volatile emotions, created ripples of both admiration and animosity within Apple and beyond. Jobs was a leader who demanded greatness, but his methods were frequently seen as abrasive, polarizing, and even cruel. Jobs' genius lay in his ability to see beyond what existed, inspiring his teams to envision products and possibilities that had never before been imagined. He pushed for excellence at every turn, often rejecting work he considered mediocre and urging employees to begin again. This relentless drive for perfection, while yielding extraordinary creations, sometimes left colleagues feeling exhausted, undervalued, or overwhelmed. Conflict was inevitable. Jobs' passion fueled intense debates, sudden changes of direction, and mercurial decision-making. Teams would labor for weeks on an initiative only to see it abruptly discarded if Jobs found it unsatisfactory. Such episodes fostered both fear and loyalty. Many Apple employees described working for Jobs as the most demanding and the most rewarding experience of their careers. Leadership at Apple under Jobs was not a democracy. He centralized authority, made bold unilateral decisions, and expected unyielding commitment from those around him. His attention to detail was legendary, famously obsessed with the visual polish of both hardware and software. Yet, Jobs' charisma and capacity to articulate a compelling vision rallied even skeptics around his cause. Jobs' penchant for perfectionism extended to all facets of the business, from product design to marketing campaigns to corporate culture. He was acutely aware of Apple's brand identity, ensuring that every touchpoint communicated innovation and elegance. This resulted in a world-class product ecosystem, but also friction with senior management, investors, and board members. The tension between Jobs' brilliance and his volatility ultimately seeded the internal strife that led to his ouster from Apple in 1985. Nevertheless, the lessons from this period about leadership, excellence, and the fine line between genius and obstinacy continue to inform business thought around the world. Jobs' legacy is not measured solely in products created, but in the disruptive spirit he instilled in generations of innovators. Chapter 9: Falling from the Throne. The Apple Ouster. The summer of 1985 stands as a watershed moment in the annals of Silicon Valley. The dramatic ouster of Steve Jobs from the company he helped create, Apple Inc. This event was not merely a corporate shuffle. It marked the end of innocence for a generation of entrepreneurs who once believed that merit, vision, and audacity could rewrite the rules of business. For Steve Jobs, the Apple ouster proved both a crucible and a catalyst. Emerging from the youthful energy of the late 1970s, Apple Computer had matured into an industry juggernaut under Jobs' charismatic leadership. However, beneath the surface of innovation and growth simmered tensions, clashes of personality, vision, and corporate stability. Jobs, driving the Macintosh project with relentless zeal, pushed his team with a mix of inspiration and fury. The Macintosh, heralded as a breakthrough in personal computing, had captured critical acclaim but stumbled commercially upon launch. Lisa, Apple's sophisticated but expensive foray preceding the Macintosh, suffered similar woes. Jobs, at age 30, felt the sting of public and internal criticism. His approach, demanding, unpredictable, and perfectionistic, alienated many, both on Apple's board and among the company's new management. The tension came to a head after the recruitment of John Sculley, the former president of PepsiCo, as Apple's CEO. Their partnership, initially characterized by mutual admiration, soon soured. Jobs' uncompromising pursuit of excellence clashed sharply with Sculley's more traditional, metrics-driven management style. The boardroom battles intensified as Apple's sales plateaued. Sculley, backed by the board, advocated a measured approach, while Jobs pushed for bold, even reckless innovation. The pivotal confrontation occurred in May 1985. After a series of secret meetings, Sculley confronted Jobs. He could lead the company, or Jobs could, but not both. The board sided with Sculley. In a single day's decision, Steve Jobs was stripped of all operational power, relegated to a largely ceremonial role. Within months, recognizing the futility of remaining marginalized in his own company, Jobs resigned. Leaving Apple was nothing short of an existential crisis for Jobs. The media flocked to cover the spectacle. One of the most flamboyant and influential business founders in modern history forced from his empire. Publicly, he remained stoic, insisting on the importance of maintaining a childlike wonder and intuition. But privately, he was devastated. Yet, in the aftermath, Jobs would reflect that being ousted from Apple was the best thing that could have happened to him. It freed him from the burdens of success, from the expectations of millions, and the scrutiny of Wall Street. Jobs later likened this period to a process of creative liberation, a chance to return to fundamentals, to embrace risk without the trappings of power. Stripped of the throne, he was, for a time, just another entrepreneur with a dream. This interregnum for Jobs became a crucible for personal and professional rediscovery. It would lead him down new paths, demanding resilience and introspection. In the silence left by the absence of Apple, the seeds of new ventures and creative undertakings were sown. The fall from his own throne did not spell an end, but marked the commencement of an unexpected and extraordinary journey, a journey of second chances. Richer in wisdom and vision. Thus, the Apple Ouster, etched into business lore as a tale of hubris and comeuppance, was in fact the prologue to an even greater story: Steve Jobs' transformation from a passionate founder into a visionary titan, capable of reshaping not just companies but culture itself. Chapter 10. Next and New Beginnings. Emerging from the shadow of his dramatic departure from Apple, Steve Jobs did not settle into obscurity. Instead, he embarked on his next great adventure, a company fittingly named NEX for Jobs. NEX was more than a technological endeavor. It was a second act, a canvas upon which he could redeploy his passion for design, innovation, and education. Jobs assembled a hand-picked team of engineers and designers, many of whom had followed him from Apple. The objective was audacious, too: build the world's most advanced computer, specifically targeting the needs of higher education and scientific research. In October 1985, with $7 million of his own funds, Jobs launched NEX Inc. From the outset, he imposed exacting standards of excellence. No detail was too minor, no component too trivial for his attention. The NEX computer, unveiled in 1988, was a marvel of engineering and aesthetics. Its distinctive black magnesium cube stood apart from the beige boxes that dominated the market. Internally, it was equipped with pioneering technologies, including an optical disk drive, a Motorola 68030 processor, and an advanced object-oriented operating system. Jobs insisted that even the machine's circuit boards be works of art, unseen but immaculate. Yet, NEX faced daunting challenges. The computer's groundbreaking features came at a high price, limiting its appeal to the broader market. Universities and scientific institutions, the target customers, lamented the high cost. NEXT's first year resulted in disappointing sales, sowing seeds of doubt. However, within these struggles, the company contributed seminal innovations: the Next Step operating system, which introduced concepts that would later become industry standards such as the dock, advanced graphics, and object-oriented programming. Despite financial headwinds, Jobs persisted, attempting to pivot NEX toward the growing software market. The hardware division was shuttered. The company refocused on Next Step, aiming to license the operating system to other manufacturers. Next Step's influence would grow far beyond its limited market presence. A generation of future products, from web browsers to Mac OS X, would draw from its DNA. During this period, Jobs matured as both a leader and a technologist. The experience of building NEX from scratch, enduring market rejection, and pivoting under pressure instilled humility and strategic patience. The creative freedom at NEX rekindled his appreciation for artistry, purity of design, and the fusion of technology with liberal arts. NEXT's legacy reached its crescendo in 1996 when Apple, floundering and desperate for a modern operating system, acquired NEX for $429 million. The purchase brought Jobs back to Apple, setting the stage for the most remarkable corporate renaissance in history. The Next Step platform would become the foundation of Apple's new operating system, OS X, a lineage that extends to modern macOS and iOS software. Although NEX never realized Jobs' original commercial ambitions, it stands as a testament to his resilience and vision, a vital crucible where he honed the philosophies and leadership qualities that would later catalyze the transformation of Apple and, by extension, the world. Chapter 11. Pixar and the Art of Storytelling. While NEX occupied the foreground of Jobs' post-Apple years, an equally transformative saga was underway in the realm of digital animation. In 1986, In a decision that blended intuition with risk, Jobs acquired the graphics group from Lucasfilm for $10 million, incorporating it as Pixar. This move, initially viewed as a speculative bet on graphics hardware, would soon metamorphose into a revolution in cinematic storytelling. Pixar's early years were marked by financial uncertainty and existential questions. The original plan was to market powerful computers to government and academic institutions. Sales were meager, forcing the company to pivot toward what seemed, at first, a sideline, creating animated commercials and short films to showcase their cutting-edge rendering software. Jobs' role evolved from financier to full-fledged believer. Enamored with the creative prospects of computer-generated animation, he forged a lasting partnership with John Lasseter, Ed Catmull, and a cohort of animators and engineers who shared his vision. What united this group was a radical idea using computers not just as tools, but as storytellers capable of evoking the full spectrum of human emotion. The breakthrough arrived in 1995 with the release of Toy Story, the world's first feature-length film created entirely with CGI. The film's unprecedented success, both commercial and critical, validated years of struggle. Jobs, who had personally staked his fortune and reputation, now found himself at the helm of a massively influential entertainment studio. Toy Story was only the beginning. Pixar, under Jobs' chairmanship, launched an unbroken streak of acclaimed films: A Bug's Life, Monsters, Inc., Finding Nemo, and The Incredibles, among others. Each release transformed the animation industry, merging technological advancement with exquisite, universal storytelling. Steve Jobs' influence extended beyond finances and business strategy. He pushed Pixar to embody his exacting standards, demanding that stories be compelling, characters deeply drawn, and technology invisible to the audience. Like his work at Apple, Jobs insisted on a seamless integration of art and science. He championed the creative process, fostering a culture of candid feedback, risk-taking, and innovation. Underpinning Pixar's ascent was a commitment to originality. Jobs issued sequels and formulaic plots, at least initially, advocating for unique narratives and emotional authenticity. His presence was both reassuring and challenging. He could be uncompromising in his criticism, but also inspiring in his belief that their films could change the world. Pixar's success reached another zenith in 2006. When the Walt Disney Company acquired it in an all-stock deal valued at $7.40 billion, instantly making Jobs Disney's largest individual shareholder. This partnership elevated Pixar's reach, ensuring its creative ethos would shape an entire generation of storytellers. For Steve Jobs, Pixar fulfilled a parallel dream: to infuse technology with humanity, giving life to stories that would resonate across time and cultures. It was no mere digression from his primary path at Apple, but a vital expression of his deepest philosophy, that technology's greatest gift is its capacity to elevate the art of storytelling. Chapter 12, The Return, saving Apple from collapse. By the mid-1990s, Apple had lost its way, rudderless, fragmented, and perilously close to bankruptcy. Once the harbinger of the personal computer revolution, Apple was now a struggling relic amid the competitive storm of Windows PC dominance. Products multiplied chaotically, leadership faltered, and innovation was stifled by internal politics. Investors and consumers alike watched as the company's fortunes declined with alarming speed. Into this crucible, in late 1996, returned a changed Steve Jobs. The path was opened by Apple's acquisition of NeXT, thereby bringing Jobs and his software innovations back to the company he had co-founded. Instead of assuming immediate control, Jobs initially positioned himself as an advisor to then CEO Gil Amelio. But within a matter of months, it was clear that the magnitude of Apple's malaise called for decisive, visionary leadership. In July 1997, the board ousted Amelio, and Jobs was named interim CEO, a title he would retain for years, relishing the symbolism of a company in mid-transformation. The magnitude of the task before him was daunting. Apple was burning through cash, bereft of direction, and hemorrhaging market share. Jobs' first order of business was triage. He slashed the unwieldy product line from more than a dozen models to a focused for desktop and laptop versions for both consumers and professionals. Excess inventory and poorly selling products were purged. Key to this turnaround was Jobs' intuition and clarity. Streamlining operations focused Apple's scarce resources on products that truly mattered. He re-energized the company culturally, attracting loyalists and recruiting new talent. The development process became streamlined and invigorated by sessions of candor and rigor. Memoirs from this period are replete with accounts of Jobs' relentless questioning and his uncanny ability to sense when a project was off track externally. Jobs made bold moves that signaled Apple's intent to survive and thrive. He forged an unprecedented partnership with arch-rival Microsoft, culminating in a $150 million investment and an agreement to continue developing Microsoft Office for Mac. This not only stabilized the company's finances, but also restored faith among developers and consumers. Second, Jobs secured a critical lifeline with the launch of the Apple Online Store, cutting through distribution complexities and reclaiming customer relationships. Perhaps most emblematic of Jobs' return was his reintroduction of marketing. Vision, the Think Different campaign, launched in 1997, was a clarion call celebrating the misfits, rebels, and visionaries whose ethos mirrored Jobs' own. It helped rekindle Apple's identity as an innovation-driven brand, inspiring both employees and the world beyond. The process was painful, entailing layoffs, strategic reversals, and difficult conversations, but the foundation was set. Against all odds, Jobs helped Apple regain profitability within a year, laying the groundwork for a string of product innovations that would follow. In rescuing Apple from the brink, Steve Jobs demonstrated not only his unique genius for product and design, but also rare capacity for evolution. He had matured in exile, absorbing lessons of humility, patience, and timing. These hard-won qualities, married to his innate passion, would soon propel Apple into its golden age. Chapter 13, Think Different, the brand that changed everything. With Apple's survival no longer in immediate jeopardy, Steve Jobs turned his attention to rekindling the soul of the company, its brand, purpose, and public perception. Central to this revival was the Think Different campaign, an initiative that would transform Apple from an embattled firm into a symbol of creativity, rebellion, and human ingenuity. Conceived in collaboration with advertising agency TBWA, Cheat Day. The campaign debuted in 1997 with a simple yet profound message. Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers. These words, paired with black and white images of luminaries such as Albert Einstein, Mahatma Gandhi, and Amelia Earhart, struck a chord worldwide. The campaign was more than an advertisement. It was a manifesto echoing Jobs' own ethos and ambitions for Apple. Think Different was not just branding, it was a declaration of ideals. For Jobs, the campaign reminded the world and Apple's employees what had always distinguished the company: a commitment to challenging norms, championing radical ideas, and fusing technology with artistry. The brand became a rallying cry for those who saw themselves as agents of change. Internally, the campaign reinvigorated morale. Apple employees, battered by years of instability, found a renewed sense of mission. Conversations shifted from survival to significance. The new brand identity provided a framework for decision-making, product development, and customer engagement. Excellence, authenticity, and risk-taking were encouraged externally. The impact was equally profound. The campaign re-established Apple as the brand for creative individuals, from designers and filmmakers to architects and musicians. The halo effect revitalized Apple's perception in the market, drawing a new generation to its banner. Apple was no longer the outsider, it was the bellwether of a creative revolution. Think Different also foreshadowed Apple's approach to product launches. The message was clear: this was a company that would not compete on specs alone, but on values and vision. The ensuing years would see Apple weave storytelling, emotion, and aspiration into every aspect of its communications. The campaign garnered numerous awards, including an Emmy for Best Commercial. Perhaps most importantly, It awakened a spirit of possibility that would animate everything from the design of the iMac to the launch of the iPod, iPhone, and beyond. By restoring Apple's identity and rallying its community, Jobs demonstrated a profound insight that brands at their best are belief systems shaping products, behaviors, and even destinies. The Think Different era set the template for Apple's next wave of innovation, making it not just a technology leader, but a cultural touchstone. Chapter 14, iMac, iPod, iTunes, Reinventing Industries. The dawn of the 21st century found Apple, under Steve Jobs' guidance, poised for a renaissance. Revitalized by its new operating system and a rekindled sense of purpose, the company turned next to a wave of products that would not merely compete, but redefine entire industries. The iMac, launched in 1998, was the vanguard of this transformation, eschewing the beige utilitarianism that dominated computer design. The iMac burst forth in a translucent, candy-colored shell that announced Apple's return to bold aesthetics. Internally, it featured USB ports in a market still reliant on older connectors, sacrificing legacy compatibility for the sake of simplicity and future-proofing. The public responded with enthusiasm, catapulting the iMac to bestseller status and rejuvenating Apple's finances. Beyond mere hardware, Jobs understood that the future of technology lay in ecosystems. In 2001, Apple entered the volatile music industry with the launch of iTunes, a digital jukebox that simplified organization and playback of music files. While competitors existed, none matched iTunes for user experience. That same year, Jobs introduced the iPod, a device that would become synonymous with portable music. The iPod's impact was seismic. In an era of fragmented MP3 players and rampant piracy, Apple's elegant device offered 1,000 songs in your pocket, transforming casual listening and putting music libraries within arm's reach. Crucially, Jobs insisted on seamless, cross-platform compatibility, eventually making iTunes available on Windows, a break from Apple's traditional walled garden strategy and a sign of market savvy. The final, transformative stroke came with the iTunes Music Store in 2003. Negotiating directly with record labels, Jobs secured the right to sell individual tracks for 99 cents. These negotiations, fraught and combative, showcased Jobs' tenacity and vision. He convinced an industry beset by piracy that a legitimate, easy-to-use platform could resurrect revenue streams. The ecosystem of iMac, iPod, and iTunes represented more than atheism of its parts. It signaled a shift in Apple's trajectory from a company selling computers to one shaping the broader tapestry of digital life. Competitors scrambled to adapt, but few could match Apple's combination of design, hardware, software integration, and cultural cachet. Through these products, Jobs refined the art of product launches, transforming industry events into global spectacles. The signature keynote address, his Steve Note, became a ritual of anticipation, secrecy, and surprise. In reinventing these industries, Jobs proved that true innovation required more than technical excellence. Vision, narrative, and a willingness to disrupt the status quo were equally essential. The era of digital convergence, where devices, content, and software formed a seamless ecosystem, had arrived. Chapter 15, the iPhone Revolution. The dawn of the 21st century witnessed a cascade of technological marvels, but none quite as seismic as the launch of the iPhone in 2007. To truly appreciate the magnitude of the iPhone revolution, one must journey back to a time when mobile phones were utilitarian, often clunky devices primarily for calls and texts, with awkward interfaces and limited functionality. It was into this fragmented landscape that Steve Jobs, armed with a vision of radical simplicity, introduced the iPhone, forever altering not only the trajectory of Apple Inc., but the very fabric of human connectivity. Jobs' insistence on integrating beauty and performance set the foundational ethos for the iPhone. He famously decreed that Apple would reinvent the phone, a pronouncement that stirred curiosity among technophiles and skepticism among competitors. Behind the scenes, Apple's engineers worked in strict secrecy, wrestling with formidable challenges: touchscreen, Technology that was responsive yet robust, seamless integration of phone and internet, and an operating system sophisticated enough for the era's growing digital needs, yet intuitive for the masses. The iPhone's introduction was more than a product launch. It was a cultural event. On January 9, 2007, Jobs took the stage at the Moscone Center in San Francisco, masterfully framing the new device as a confluence of an iPod, a phone, and an internet communicator. His presentation, characterized by theatrical pauses and the signature black turtleneck attire, captivated the audience and swiftly reverberated across global media. What distinguished the iPhone was not just its minimalist design or capacitive multi-touch screen, but a fundamental reimagining of how humans interact with technology. The physical keyboard, a staple of competitors, was replaced with a glass canvas, inviting the user's fingertips to dance across icons and content. Upon its release in June 2007, the iPhone rapidly transcended its role as a luxury gadget to become an object of desire, a status symbol, and ultimately a ubiquitous tool. The App Store, introduced in 2008, unleashed a creative ecosystem, empowering developers worldwide to invent applications that extended the functionality of the iPhone far beyond its original blueprint. From personal productivity and photography to navigation and entertainment, the iPhone became the gateway to a digital universe. The societal implications of the iPhone revolution are profound. It democratized access to information, collapsing the distance between continents and individuals. It redefined industries. Photography, journalism, navigation, and commerce were each disrupted or reinvented in its wake. Communication itself became instantaneous, visual, and global. The smartphone, a term popularized by Apple's innovation, transformed leisure, work, and the routines of daily life. Perhaps most remarkably, the iPhone was both a product of Steve Jobs' perfectionism and his capacity to imagine a future unseen by others. Where detractors saw merely another phone, Jobs perceived a platform, a blank slate limited only by imagination. The device's relentless evolution, from hardware refinements to software advancements, is a testament to the philosophy Jobs championed, that technology, when elegantly and thoughtfully designed, becomes an extension of the human spirit. The iPhone was not without its detractors or challenges. Critics decried its exclusivity, price, and closed ecosystem. Competitors raced to mimic its features, yet, as billions of users around the world now swipe, tap, and zoom their way through life, the disruptive legacy of Steve Jobs' iPhone remains one of the most consequential chapters in the story of innovation. Chapter 16. The iPad and the post-PC era. If the iPhone reimagined the phone, the iPad redefined the notion of computing. The unveiling of the iPad in 2010 was met with a blend of skepticism and intrigue. Pundits dismissed it as a large iPhone, questioning its necessity in a world already saturated with smartphones and laptops. Yet, Steve Jobs perceived a chasm in user experience between the portability of smartphones and the power of laptops, a space ripe for reinvention. The genesis of the iPad stretches back to Apple's earliest forays into multi-touch technology. Even as the iPhone was in development, Jobs envisioned a tablet that could provide a more immersive, almost tangible connection to digital content, with characteristic secrecy and ambition. Apple's design and engineering teams iterated over numerous prototypes, striving for a device that was light, responsive, and inviting, a device that felt as natural as holding a piece of paper. The launch event for the iPad was Vintage Jobs, an exercise in narrative artistry. Holding the sleek slate before a packed auditorium, he proclaimed, "We want to kick off 2010 by introducing a magical and revolutionary device." At an unbelievable price, the iPad, with its 9.7-inch display and seamless integration with Apple's app ecosystem, was not merely a scaled iPhone, it was a canvas for creativity, learning, and consumption. At first blush, the iPad's capabilities seemed modest: web browsing, email, photos, ebooks, music, and video. However, within months, developers and users began to unleash its transformative potential. In education, classrooms were reimagined with interactive textbooks and multimedia lessons. In healthcare, doctors used the iPad for patient records and diagnostics. Artists, writers, and musicians found an intuitive tool for sketching ideas. Composing music and authoring books. The iPad catalyzed what Jobs termed the post-PC era. He foresaw a future where traditional computers would recede into the background, supplanted by intuitive, gesture-based devices that anyone from children to seniors could master. This vision was not universally embraced. Critics derided the iPad as a device for consumption, rather than creation. However, over time, the emergence of powerful apps and accessories, styluses, keyboards, and integration with cloud services expanded its functionality. Blurring the line between consumption and creation, the impact on industry and culture was significant. Competitors rushed to launch tablets, but few matched the harmonious blend of hardware and software that distinguished the iPad. Publishing houses, filmmakers, and game developers all vied to exploit the iPad's immersive experience. The device shifted the dynamics of content delivery and consumption, empowering individuals and enterprises alike to engage with information in previously unimaginable ways. The iPad's evolution continued at a brisk pace, with successive models offering faster processors, higher resolution displays, and innovative features such as FaceTime and Apple Pencil. Its versatility ensured that it found a home not just on coffee tables but in airplanes, hospitals, studios, and boardrooms worldwide. At its core, the iPad exemplified Steve Jobs' belief that technology should serve as a friendly companion, a window, not a barrier, to human potential. The subsequent proliferation of tablets validated Jobs' vision, as the post-PC paradigm reshaped how society interacts with information, art, and each other. Chapter 17. The Reality Distortion Field. Steve Jobs was often described as mercurial, intense, and, above all, persuasive. Colleagues and competitors alike spoke in awe and frustration of his uncanny ability to redefine what was possible, a phenomenon so pronounced that Apple insiders referred to it as the Reality Distortion Field, RDF. This chapter delves into the mysterious aura and psychological force that shaped both the triumphs and the tribulations of Jobs' professional life. The term reality distortion field was first coined by Bud Tribble, an Apple engineer, during the formative years of the Macintosh project. It described Jobs' extraordinary capacity to bend perceptions, to impel teams to achieve what seemed unattainable and, at times, to warp the truth for the sake of vision. To enter Jobs' RDF was to be swept into an atmosphere of impossibly high expectations and relentless momentum. Deadlines were compressed, technical hurdles dismissed, and doubts obliterated by sheer conviction. At its most constructive, the RDF pushed individuals and teams to exceed their own limits. Engineers who believed a task required months of labor often found themselves achieving breakthroughs within weeks. Jobs' passion and charisma ignited intense focus and creative problem-solving, fostering a culture of innovation unparalleled in the industry. Under his influence, products emerged that shocked the world. The first Macintosh, the iPod, the iPhone, each the fruit of a collective leap into the unknown. Guided by Jobs' unwavering certainty. Yet, the reality distortion field had a shadow side. It was not mere optimism but a tool wielded with exacting force. Jobs could be unyielding, dismissive of compromise, and sometimes blind to dissent. He challenged subordinates to defend their ideas vigorously, but could swiftly shift from encouragement to excoriation. For some, the pressure fueled excellence; for others, it exacted a heavy emotional toll. Jobs' reality was elastic. Marketing timelines, manufacturing limitations, software bugs all seemed mutable in his presence. When told something was impossible, Jobs would retort, "Don't be afraid, you can do it." His confidence, inspiring and intimidating, became a self-fulfilling prophecy. Teams internalized his vision, pushing through exhaustion and doubt, often discovering abilities they themselves had not recognized. The RDF was not manipulated for its own sake. Jobs genuinely believed in pursuing perfection and inspiring those around him to do the same. He was acutely aware of the power of narrative, harnessing storytelling to galvanize customers and colleagues. His legendary product, launches brimming with anticipation and showmanship, were masterclasses in shaping perception and desire. However, the reality distortion field could also breed dysfunction. Unrealistic deadlines and all-or-nothing challenges sometimes led to burnout or project delays. Critics accused Jobs of ignoring practical realities, of risking costly missteps by chasing idealistic goals. Yet, in retrospect, many of Apple's greatest achievements were born precisely in these crucibles of irrational ambition. In sum, the reality distortion field encapsulates the paradox of Steve Jobs, a leader who, by sheer force of personality, alternately inspired and unsettled, demanded excellence and drove innovation. The lesson of the RDF endures as both inspiration and caution, reminding us that reality is often the canvas upon which visionaries paint the future. Chapter 18: Battles with Illness and Time. The narrative of Steve Jobs is inseparable from his protracted battle with illness, a struggle that shadowed his late years and imparted profundity to his life's work. Diagnosed in 2003 with a rare form of pancreatic neuroendocrine tumor, Jobs faced not only the physical ravages of disease, but also the existential reckoning that unfolds as one stares into the finite nature of human existence. Jobs' initial response to his diagnosis was emblematic of his defiant spirit. Eschewing conventional medicine at first, he explored alternative therapies, a decision that sparked considerable debate among family, friends, and later medical experts. His characteristic desire for control, the same force that had driven innovation at Apple, now guided him through a personal labyrinth of hope, denial, and determination. In 2004, faced with the progression of his illness, Jobs underwent surgery, a turning point both physically and emotionally. The effect of his illness on Apple and its employees was profound. For years, Jobs guarded the details of his health with scrupulous privacy, mindful of investor jitters and competitive threats. His periodic absences from Apple fueled rumors and speculation, with each public appearance scrutinized for signs of decline. Yet, even as his body weakened, Jobs' intellectual vitality persisted. From his hospital bed, he continued to review products, challenge teams, and refine strategic direction, communicating through calls and emails. The confrontation with mortality infused Jobs' work with a unique urgency and depth. He famously urged students at his 2005 Stanford commencement address to remember that you are going to die, an admonition born not of morbidity, but of existential clarity. For Jobs, the ever-present specter of death was a catalyst compelling him to focus on what truly mattered, to strip away the inessential and embrace only that which was meaningful and beautiful. Jobs' struggles also humanized a figure often caricatured as a mercurial genius. Accounts from those closest to him reveal moments of vulnerability, regret, and reflection. He reconciled with old adversaries, invested in relationships with family, and contemplated the legacy he would leave behind. Yet, even as the disease progressed, he remained fiercely engaged in the process of creation. The iPhone 4, and iCloud all bear the imprint of his indomitable will. The final act of Jobs' life, marked by declining health and retreat from public visibility, was poignant yet inspiring. In August 2011, he resigned as Apple's CEO, acknowledging that he could no longer meet the demands of leadership. His resignation letter was direct, humble, and suffused with gratitude, a farewell not just to a company, but to an era defined by his vision. Steve Jobs passed away on October 5, 2011, but his confrontation with illness and time resonates far beyond the world of technology. His journey reminds us that creativity and passion can be sharpened, not diminished, by the certainty of mortality in the face of fragility. Jobs chose to live and create with an intensity and purpose that continues to inspire generations. Chapter 19: Leadership, Legacy, and Philosophy. The essence of Steve Jobs' influence lies not merely in the products he delivered, but in the leadership philosophy that animated his career, and the legacy that endures in his absence. Jobs' approach to leadership was unconventional, at times controversial, but always marked by a desire to align technology with a deeper aesthetic and humanistic purpose. In management, Jobs was famously hands-on. He immersed himself in every facet of product development, from hardware design and software interface to packaging and retail. His attention to detail was legendary. Even the internal components of Apple products, invisible to users, were expected to meet exacting standards of elegance. This pursuit sprang from his conviction that customers could intuit quality, even if they could not articulate why one product felt superior to another. Jobs placed enormous trust in talented individuals, but demanded uncompromising excellence. Mediocrity was abhorred. Failure to rise to the occasion was met with stinging candor. He recruited people not only for their skills, but for their passion and willingness to challenge the conventional wisdom. Debates were encouraged, ideas relentlessly tested and refined. This crucible of intensity, at once exhilarating and daunting, produced a culture where innovation thrived. Philosophically, Jobs espoused a blend of Zen-inflected minimalism, countercultural idealism, and business pragmatism. He viewed technology as an extension of human potential, a tool to amplify creativity and enrich life. The simplicity that defined Apple products was not just a design principle, but a moral imperative. Jobs believed in saying no to 1,000 things, focusing only on ideas that mattered. A central tenet of his philosophy was the value of intuition. Contrary to the market research orthodoxies of the era, Jobs trusted in his sense of what people would desire before they themselves knew it. "It's really hard to design products by focus groups," he remarked. "A lot of times, people don't know what they want until you show it to them." This instinctive approach, coupled with rigorous execution, set Apple apart as a crucible of disruptive creativity. Jobs' legacy is multifaceted. He is credited with shaping the personal computing revolution, forever changing how people interact with information. The Apple ecosystem, Mac, iPod, iPhone, iPad, and associated services, represents a holistic approach to technology, distinguished by elegant design and seamless user experience. His principles have been adopted, emulated, and, at times, misinterpreted across the tech industry. Beyond products, Jobs' impact endures in the narratives of aspiration he crafted. He inspired legions to dream bigger, to remain unsatisfied with the ordinary, to believe in the capacity of a small group to change the world. The values he championed, focus, intuition, craftsmanship, constitute a philosophy of work and life that transcends the specifics of software and hardware. In contemplating Jobs' leadership and legacy, one must acknowledge the shadows as well as the light. His intensity and perfectionism exacted a toll on those around him. At times, he was divisive, demanding, and resistant to compromise. Yet, it is precisely these qualities, tempered by vision, intellect, and a passion for excellence, that enabled him to build not just products, but institutions and ideals. The story of Steve Jobs ultimately teaches that leadership is less about consensus than about conviction, a readiness to defy convention, take risks, and shape reality according to a vision of what might be. In this, his legacy is immortal. Chapter 20, Stay Hungry, Stay Foolish, The Immortal Impact. In 2005, Steve Jobs addressed Stanford University's graduating class with a message that has since echoed across generations. Stay hungry, stay foolish. These words, borrowed from the final issue of the Whole Earth catalog, encapsulate not only Jobs' personal philosophy, but also the enduring impact he has left on the world. Behind their simplicity is a profound challenge to remain insatiably curious, to pursue audacious dreams, and to embrace risk and vulnerability. The resonance of Jobs' legacy lies as much in the intangible ethos he cultivated as in the sleek devices that bear Apple's emblem. His influence can be felt in classrooms where students learn to code, in startups daring to disrupt industries, and in everyday individuals who believe it is possible to reshape their world. Jobs' impact is immortal not because he defied death, but because his ideas continue to inspire action, innovation, and reflection. He championed the belief That one does not have to accept the world as it is handed to them. In his eyes, reality was malleable, a canvas for reconsideration and reinvention. Think different, he insisted, not for the sake of rebellion, but to find better answers, forge new paths and expand the scope of human achievement. That mindset has become part of the global cultural DNA, inspiring countless stories of persistence. Amidst adversity, the proliferation of Apple devices, iPhone, iPad, MacBook made technology intimate and accessible, but, more significantly, signaled the dawn of a new creative era. Artists, engineers, writers, and dreamers found in these tools the confidence to express, invent, and connect. Steve Jobs' pursuit of user-centered technology laid the groundwork for this creative explosion, inviting everyone to be both consumer and creator. Beyond technology, Jobs' life is a lesson in second acts and resilience. Ousted from Apple in 1985, he returned more seasoned, his vision sharper. He reminded the world that failure can fertilize the seeds of future triumph, a lesson referenced by CEOs, artists, and educators alike. The stories of Pixar, Next, and Apple's rebirth are testaments to staying hungry, never ceasing to learn, question, and strive. Today, stay hungry, stay foolish adorns dorm room walls, entrepreneurial manifestos, and innovation labs worldwide. It's a reminder to chase what sets your soul on fire, to remain open to wonder, to dare greatly even in the face of uncertainty. In this, Steve Jobs becomes more than a person, he becomes a rallying spirit for the dreamers who shape tomorrow.